There you go. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Elaine Duff. Welcome to Celebrating the Brand Ambassador. I'm here. I'm celebrating my birthday today, which I'm very excited about to be celebrating my birthday with all of you and also my lovely guests, two women who I fangirl from far away and whenever I see them. So I am here with Teresa Cesario and Miranda Dickson. Both of these amazing women have worked with Absolut over their career, but have done so many things. And that's where I want to start off because I love to start the first half of the show by talking about your backgrounds, because we all get to know each other. We say cheers, hi, blah, blah, blah. And we have little short conversations, but we never know everybody's backstory. It's one of the reasons why I put this show together, so I can get to know people a little bit better. So Teresa, I'm going to start with you. A little bit of your backstory and how you got to the position where you are now, which is, pretty amazing. So, Teresa, you go first.
Okay. Well, Elaine, first and foremost, thank you for having us on here and putting me with Miranda, who is across the pond, but it feels so nice to be sharing space with all of these gorgeous goddesses. I have kind of a topsy-turvy entry into the spirits world as well as to Elyx. So I would be remiss not to mention that my father's been in the liquor industry for 45 years, starting at the distributor and then being a partner in a wine company. He just retired this past year, but he made a comment to me as I was going to college to study jazz, because, a jazz degree parlays perfectly into the liquor industry.
Exactly.
He always said to me that the closest thing to being in the entertainment industry without being in it is being in the liquor industry, because you have this wild cast of characters. Every time you go in for a sales call, it's like an audition. Every time you do a presentation of spirits or you do a GSM, it's a show. And I didn't quite realize how close to being in a show I was going to get until I was with Absolut Elyx. I was literally in shows with Elyx. So I started off at the distributor at Southern Wine and Spirits in Illinois, and then was plucked from oblivion from two very strong, amazing women, Rachel Irvin and Kathleen Smith, who are still with Bacardi. Incredible human beings. And I worked for Bacardi then for 7 years in Illinois. I started as a market manager and then became a state manager. And that's when my Thor of a Mufasa man came into my life and made me move to Florida. Quite frankly, the story is Rachel and Kathleen came into my office and shut the door and said, Teresa, there's a man coming in the office today. Dating him would be career suicide. Stay away from him. He's bad news. And I'm like, okay, no problem. No problem, women who I idolize. I will do as you say. What's his name? And so then they're like, John Cicero. And then John Cicero walked in the office, and I remember thinking, my God, this is the most beautiful man I've ever seen. I called my sister and I said, I met the first man I ever thought was out of my league. And of course, immediately the tension built and we ended up connecting. And you can't leave a man that looks like that alone on South Beach for obvious reasons. So I had to make the decision on what to do, and not wanting to go to the same office every day as my then boyfriend, I decided to look elsewhere. So I got a what I called the kind of a holdover position. I was working with a startup rum company, and I ended up in Snowmass with a wonderful woman named Kristen Schaefer, now Kristen Besley, a legend in the brand ambassador industry, one of the first ambassadors for Absolut. And we became fast friends. Then I found myself in Florida at a barbecue at the most amazing man, John LeMayer's house. And I was sitting there with my camera, and I'm starting to take pictures of this funny Scottish man with an afro named Stefan Ogini and his new baby. And I'm like, oh, hey, let me get your email address. I'll send you these photos of your child. 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from Kristen, and she's like, Teresa, I know you want to get with a larger supplier. I have a great opportunity for you. I'm like, okay, what is it? And she goes, there's a new brand that's launching called Absolut Elyx, and it's going to be fabulous. And I'm like, okay, Kristen, you're over the top. How fabulous could a vodka really be? And she's like, no, Teresa, and it's not a brand ambassador role, because admittedly, where I came from the sales world, I've been in this now for 13 years. So coming from an intense sales background, I looked at brand ambassadors like these fluffy, easy peasy, kind of a joke of a job. Admittedly, when I was in that position, I was like, what do they even do? They just run around with lots of money. Like, I don't get it. I didn't get it. And
Teresa, I'm going to stop you because I asked you, is that really, is that the reputation? Do you think most salespeople think about brand ambassadors?
I think 10 years ago it was.
Okay.
I think that go ahead, Em.
No, I don't even think just salespeople. I think everybody in the marketing team maybe had this kind of impression. The BA has the card, the BA's going out, the BA comes in the office bleary-eyed. I could cite and name names on the big abusers here, because I think there's definitely people in our industry who rode that right to the end, and I think that with Elyx, actually, we were sort of like, how can we make a program that isn't that? It's got to be all the fun, all the connections, all the kind of bringing back, having these amazing moments and making these connections. But also, at the end of the day, we're here to sell vodka, and we have to build a program that is going to work on, being commercially, bringing home the bacon commercially, because otherwise it's just a nice to have piece.
Right, exactly. Right. So it's a fine balance. So Teresa, sorry.
That's a perfect segue into what I was saying is Kristen actually had to sell me the role as a hybrid of sales and ambassadorship. And so I was like, okay, I'm willing to give this a try, because like I want it. And I'm Pernod Ricard. I was a company I always aspirationally wanted to be a part of. So I was like, I'll give it a try. And then serendipitously, she goes, here's the person you have to email. And it was Stefan. So it was like through the legendary John LeMayer, I found this person, Stefan, who it turns out is the person that was my first interview with Elyx. So I get on the phone.
I just say something here, because he was like, I met this crazy woman in Miami at a barbecue, by the way. I think she's going to be perfect. And I was like, okay, great.
Great selling critique.
But this leads into like Stefan's interview with me. At the end of it, he goes, all right, I'm going to introduce you to a woman named Miranda. She's mental. Don't be afraid of her. Like, she's either, but I will tell you, she will love you or she will hate you. Like, that's it. So I'm like, okay, great. So I'm going into an interview and it's a strong 50-50. Now, mind you, my father's 100% Italian, 6'2", not the kind of guy you want to run into in a dark alley. He's like a very strong, staunch Italian man. And he wouldn't let us work in the service industry, because back then, as you know, when we talked about Elaine, 10 years ago, a female in the service industry had to endure a lot more hardships than they do today. And so my father, being protective, was like, I'd like for you to take an avenue in distributorship instead of in the service industry. So I admittedly had never made a martini. And so I get on the phone, I call a couple brand ambassador friends, it tapped into my husband's network of people that worked for him. And I was like, someone teach me how to make a martini. No idea. So I end up pre-batching a martini in a bottle that says very, very bad poison. Now, little did I know, Miranda is a fan of all things kind of cryptically eccentric. And so when I went there, I brought props. I had like antlers. I had the pre-batched bottle. I did a wacky presentation. It was all a real blur, because I was like, okay, I'm teaching you about Absolut Elyx. Here's Grey Goose. Here's Rika vodka. Like, I have no idea. And then at the end, I pour this martini for them. And I'm like, well, if you like me, you'll drink this because it's very, very bad poison. wink. And then I remember Miranda having no reaction from like here down, and her eyes were so big and her eyebrows were raised. She was like, what the just happened here? What is happening? And then she dismisses everyone else that was in the room, which was Stefan and Jack Hubbard. And they were in the hallway afterwards, found out they were giggling, and they were like, that was the most insane thing I've ever seen.
Wait, I have to ask, Miranda, what was your reaction? What was your thinking? I mean, you obviously hired her.
She's missing some pieces out there, actually, but maybe we won't go into those. Maybe it's before the watershed. I think, yeah, I mean, I remember that we interviewed a bunch of people for different markets. And I think we were, as I said, we were looking for kind of different people, and people that made you kind of wake up and recognize them. And as we talked about before, the big challenge is breaking through in this super premium vodka world. So I'm not saying you're a weapon, Teresa, but every, opportunity that you can have, that you take it. So I think that, we didn't want any wallflowers. That wasn't really what we were aiming for. And less about knowledge. You can teach people knowledge. You can't teach people to have personalities. You definitely can't teach people to be Teresa. So yeah, I mean, that's how I remember.
I think that's a great thing. I also love, Teresa, the fact that you prepared. Like, that is something, because a lot of people are interviewing right now to be brand ambassadors. They're going into a job, they've never done it before. And, the fact that you did, you called up some friends to find out how to make a martini. You were saying yesterday you got some decks so you can like research some of the information. You researched Miranda a bit to see, maybe I should bring some extra props, or maybe you just brought props because that's your as you said, you're weird, your internal weirdness, as you described to me yesterday, which I love that, everything about you. And I love the story when Miranda dismissed everybody.
And we were left alone. And I think the way that I'll choose to say this is I had an opportunity to tell her a bit about what I did outside of being in the spirits industry, and I threw all my weird at Miranda. I didn't leave anything out. I threw all of my weird at her. But when you look at someone like Miranda that's unapologetically authentic, you feel like you have a runway to be honest, because this person's so truthful with who they are as a person, and I have had the blessing of working for exclusively, with the exception of Stefan, strong women. Like, God, I'm so lucky that I have journeyed through the spirits industry under the guidance of these just unbelievably strong women. And seeing Miranda, I saw someone who wasn't afraid to be themselves, wasn't afraid to take chances. So at the end of the interview, I took some chances and I said, if this person can accept me for the entirety of who I am, then this is exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. And I was lucky, and I was fortunate to be a part of this incredible Elyx team that I think is legendary in the brand ambassador industry because of the way in which we did things and the way in which, Miranda took this brainchild to life. Like, talk about Tales with a Cocktail. You can't talk about Tales with a Cocktail and not think of the Garden of Elyx. Like,
absolutely.
You can't. So I think that was my journey to joining the Elyx team.
I love that. And we'll talk about what you're doing now later on. And Miranda, you have an extensive career, from working in the bar industry to where you are now. And it's such a great story because it's such an unusual one, to going from the bar industry to a global director in a big company, because most people think a different path where they would normally go through school and they would get their master's and all these things, and that is not your journey. So please elaborate on that, where you started in the bar industry and how you grew your career.
So I got a degree in theology and Egyptology, so not traditional subjects one would equate with anything to do with the world. It's a self-indulgent degree, I think, is how I always thought it. Something I was super interested in, and I just studied or not for 3 years. And during which time I was DJing and I started running sort of nights in actually one of the first internet cafe in Europe. There was a time when, it was too expensive to be online at home, and people would go to a cafe and pay for 1 hour to go online, And so we had this internet cafe, and we got this place a license. So I went through the process of licensing this venue. This was in Manchester. For those of you who music orientated, there's lots of music things happen in Manchester. And so I got to meet a lot of really interesting people in the music industry there. And one day there's a kind of this vodka bar down the road. Maybe I went there a couple of times, I don't know. And by the way, in this internet cafe, I guess that we served a few cocktails. We did art exhibitions and, as I say, some kind of more music orientated stuff. And I met a guy called Paul Newman who worked for Absolut Vodka. And Paul Newman has been someone I've thought about a lot in my career because he was just so cool. So, he was the guy that could get you in anywhere. He was like, Miranda, if you ever want to do like an exhibition or you want to, Absolut will be there. We'll support you. We can give you these cool glasses with this little blue bit at the bottom that's shaped like this. Oh my God, so cool. My parents were in the travel business, so we traveled a lot and we always had Absolut vodka at home. So I was always kind of quite, au fait with this cool product. Anyway, I thought he was very cool. And the bar down the road was this bar called Revolution. And in this bar, they made their own flavors with Absolut vodka, 30 flavors. And the guys who owned it, Roy and Neil, were sort of kept coming in and sort of chatting to me. And then they said, hey, what do you think about coming down the road, coming work for us? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And this, it's a much bigger bar. I think you'd be great. And I was like, okay, sure. Yeah, why not? And when I got that job, I was really like, wow, I'm going to get paid to actually work in a really cool bar all the time. That's amazing, And I couldn't believe how much money the bar wasn't taking, to be honest. It was packed 7 days a week and they didn't seem to be taking much money. I think that there was so much vodka consumed. And in this bar, they had 50 or so of these vodkas that we called, specialty vodkas. And they were all sorts of products that probably you can't even get some of them today from the vodka heartland and beyond, with names people couldn't pronounce, not even the staff. So you had, the house pouring vodka, which was Absolut vodka, all these flavors made with Absolut vodka, and then this sort of, I want to say 65, 70 other products on the shelf. And I was kind of like really confused. I was like, guys, how are we going to sell something that you guys can't pronounce, the customers can't pronounce, and we know nothing about them? And they were like, exactly, that's your problem. Go solve that. And I was kind of like, okay, fine. So, my first starting point was honestly finding someone who was Polish and saying, can you help me with the phonetic pronunciation of some of these things? Because I can't even say these things.
Wow.
How do you say Zitnia? How do you pronounce this? And then I basically started phoning up because brand ambassadors didn't exist. This is my point. There was.
What year was this, you think, around?
Oh my God. So this was, I want to say 1997 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say. And the guys who sold you the product didn't really know about them other than what was written on the bottle. So that was weird because everything hinged on what was written on the bottle at the time. And now, of course, funnily, being on the brand side, you're like, oh God, what are we going to put on the bottle? And you just like go back and forth about what's going to be on the bottle. And but so anyway, the only thing we knew about the product was on the bottle. So, and then I really kind of got into trying to find out about each product, where it was made. And my boss was like, wow, you're finding out all these things. You really are the Vodka Princess. And this was this sort of name that stuck. And through actually our distributor, and actually it was probably Stuart Eakins who worked for Inspirit Brands, because I would say that they had Kettle One in the UK. They were probably the most clued up about their product. And they said, yeah, come to Amsterdam, come and meet Bob Nola, and we'll tell you all about how we make Kettle One. I was like, wow, amazing. And then Dave Stewart, who worked for a company called Marblehead, he invited me, I want to say first to Vibrova and then later on to Luxusova.
Amazing.
And so I just got all this exposure to how these products are made. And of course, lo and behold, you then make that into a training program, and the staff know how to pronounce them. Then you start making drinks with them, or actually saying, well, how would I drink this weird typical cherry vodka? Well, actually, it's really good with Coke. It's a crazy cherry Coke.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it seems so elementary today, but 20 years ago, people were like, oh my God, that's amazing. And also, this is a world in which there weren't 3 million flavored vodkas, remember. There was like 4 Absolut flavors at the time, I want to say. Anyway, so from there, I went on to look after Revolution had, I think, 4 or 5 bars at the time. When I left, they had 42. This kind of hybrid role of Vodka Princess led to me taking a much more significant role from a commercial point of view in terms of vodka purchasing. I was lucky enough to visit distilleries all over the world. And learn about how each product was made. A gentleman called Mark Ridgewell I worked with Taste and Flavor. I did things with Theme Magazine, Class Magazine, and of course Ian Wisniewski was also someone who was a great source of information about everything in Polish vodka.
Amazing.
We wrote a couple of books and things for Revolution about vodka in general, etc.
Wait, there's a vodka book out there that you were part of.
Yeah, well, I think there was 3 of them. I mean, we used to have them as these sort of extreme menus. In fact, this is all sort of, I suppose, a bit dead rabbity, isn't it? But a big hardback menu with like big pieces of information about each product.
Incredible.
And lovely.
If you could find that, you need to put it out there in the world, because there's not a lot of good vodka books out there.
I want to see if it's somewhere around here now.
I know Tony Abogano wrote one. That's probably the best one out there, but there's a lot of bad ones that have really bad information out there. Yes, anyway, story for another day, but I'd love you to find it.
So from Revolution, what did I do? I did some consultancy things, worked for another group as beverage director, and then met a gentleman called Cesar Giron, and between him and Dave Stewart, they said, hey, we know you love Poland and you love Polish vodka. Why not come and live there? It's going to be great. And I was kind of like so enthralled and in love with Polish vodka, and so excited by the prospect of, oh my God, I could go and live in Poland. So I was like, yes. So off I, packed up my life in Manchester and went off to live in Poland for 5 years. That was definitely a life-changing experience. And
I can imagine.
Personal growth, huge. So I started off as a brand ambassador. And they said, come and be this brand ambassador. You'll get to travel the whole world. And I did. And Vibrova at the time was the only vodka Pernod Ricard had. So it was the number 1 priority for them. So it's a very different position for the group without Absolut, if you like. Then I became, then I had, I want to say 4 BAs underneath me, 5 BAs underneath me. We built with Henry Besant and Dre Masso something called the World Cocktail Experience. And the idea behind that is that we would go to countries in which cocktail culture was still embryonic, and we would build cocktail culture as a whole. So we'd add much more value than just sitting there banging on about vodka, basically.
That's amazing.
So vodka was a big part of it, but we also touched on, classic cocktails, the most famous cocktails in the world, different spirits categories, etc., as part of the program. And we did, I want to say, 26 countries, different cities within those countries. It was a pretty intense I reckon we ran that for like 3 years or something, the three of us traveling together. And of course, during that time, I just learned so much from them and working with them, and also with Nick Strangeway. And we had
what an incredible group of people to be able to be traveling with. Nick Strangeway, Henry Bassett. That's an incredible team. And yourself, wow. You must have revolutionized the world, especially back then. The cocktail industry was so new.
Exactly. And the stories I could tell. Oh my goodness. And then obviously Absolut came up with Pernod, and they said, well, you're the vodka woman, you've got to do it. What about living in Sweden? And I said, guys, I've just done 5 years in Poland. Absolutely not. I need to go back to somewhere with a bit more normality. So I moved to London, and they set up actually the commercial office at the time for Absolut Vodka in London. And so there was a 25 people commercial office working out of central London office. And from there, I was like the head of trade marketing. And so I sort of did a hybrid there between kind of brand education and tools for the trade for the Absolut companies. That also at that time broadened my wings to include Kahlua and Malibu, as well as the Absolut portfolio. And then, of course, Elyx came along, and this was the big bet for the company. And wow! I mean, the liquid was just out of control. It was so delicious. I remember the first dinner I ever had with Absolut, because I moved from Vibrova company to Absolut, didn't know anybody, and sat next to Krista Asplund, who is the guy who created it. And everybody's talking about this product, but it did have, I must say, a very bad bottle. And I told them it had a bad bottle, and everybody got very cross with me. But they'd all actually said that themselves in secret, and they were planning on changing the bottle anyway, it turned out.
Elyx had a bad bottle.
Yes.
The original one. Okay.
The original bottle, yeah. So it was like kind of a white label with these circles all over it, etc. And at this stage, by the way, I think we tested it in Mexico, Canada, and Greece. I want to say those were the 3 test markets. It was such a different positioning. I mean, the idea was you wouldn't go against Grey Goose. It would be for people to sip in hotel bars. That was the initial vision for it. And then America said, "But we think we want it." So at this stage, I think I worked on it, I want to say, for like 3 years as part of Absolut, actually working and focusing on Elyx, because I built out a whole academy in Sweden for Absolut Vodka, a whole new bartending thing, working with Henry and Nick Strangeway. And Jack Hubbard, of course. He's been a big part of the gang. And then it wasn't until 2000 and I want to say 15, 14 that we went just on Elyx, and we decided really that we had a real vision for Elyx, and we felt that we had to actually move from being in Sweden. I mean, I was in London, but I mean, it was coming from Sweden to actually move to being in the US. And I think that's very, very true. I mean, for me, I thought, oh, I know the US. Oh yeah, come on, I know it. Oh my God, I knew like this much.
It's like 50 countries in one.
The learning curve of the US was so incredible for me. But I mean, it was super intense, very different from any of the other brand building work that I'd done in any other part of the world. And of course, Elyx was constructed as a very trade forward brand. That was our go-to. That was our sort of point of penetration to the market, I guess. And
Well, I wanted to ask you, because we'll get to the next question, but for you, as I said, you came from the bar industry, then you started working as a brand ambassador, and you did run programs and things like that. Like, we did some pretty serious work when you worked for the Revolution bar. But did most people you work with have an MBA in Pernod or Absolut? Sorry.
In Pernod, yeah. I mean, I think that 100%. I mean, either in some sort of, actually at this time, in Poland, I want to say all the senior people were French. And then there were local junior people worked on the brand who were Polish. In Absolut, a bit different because Pernod had just bought Absolut from a Swedish company. Okay, so it was a government-owned business before. So you had a very eclectic collection of people working there. And I want to say, the workforce was in huge transition and massively kind of slimmed down and changed from the government model. But yes, I mean, on the whole, I was very different.
And what about your job? You were talking about yesterday that translated, because I think it's important for brands and bigger companies to understand this. Like, there is a lot of things, and I know, Teresa, we talked about this too, but that because of your background, I obviously bring a different perspective, but there was a lot of things for you that translated from your previous job of running programs within bars to working on a brand. So can you expand on that?
Yes, so I think that was something very interesting to me. I mean, so, working on Vibrova in Poland was one thing. I mean, that was a crazy experience from not much else. But going into Absolut, a huge brand, a household name. It was surprising for me the lack of understanding people had about the on-premise and about the way the on-premise works. And just because cocktail culture was still sort of an emerging, it was very much an emerging piece, although, it was established in these very tiny, less than 1% bars in the world. We're in the industry, so we think, oh, it's massive. It is not. It's like teeny
tiny.
I mean, goodness, I remember even when I was in Poland with Cesar and Cesar Giron. So he's one of the Ricard family. He's an amazing man. And
thanks, Damien.
And he was somebody who was like, about cocktails. You've got to tell people in Paris about cocktails. Let's do this. Let's go to Paris. Let's go and speak to the board, and you can tell them all about cocktail culture and how important it is for our company to get on board with cocktail culture. And I was like, you've got to be kidding, So I want to say it was me and Henry. It was either me and Henry or me and Dre, and we kind of went terrified. And they were just like, cocktail culture. What are you talking about? You don't need cocktails in France. What are you talking about, you crazy people? I mean, it was literally, and we were like, well, it's going to happen, and then, of course, I mean, it starts but I think, the thing that was interesting for me is that, I'd started off as just someone kind of working in a bar. And by the way, pretty much self-taught, other than, experiences I've had with Henry, Dre, Dick Bradsell as well. I worked with him, which is incredible. And, I think the thing that was so interesting is that brands don't really understand how things really work. They think, oh, if I go and drop 24 glasses into a bar, that's fine. Everyone's going to obviously serve the drinks in them. Absolutely not. If the manager likes them, they're going to take them home immediately. And if they don't fit on the shelves in your bar, not a chance. And also, like, you've got to, what bar really wants to have, and is that the reality? They're going to have a glass for this spirit, that spirit, da, 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 da. And especially in a world where, cocktail culture is just emerging, there's no understanding of, at that time, a bar's going to have an old fashioned, probably going to have a highball, might have a hurricane, probably going to have a cocktail. That's probably going to be it. So you with your crazy glasses, people aren't going to want to stock those items. And I think it was about saying, we need to create things the bars actually want that aren't going to break and that are going to add incremental sales or add value to the bar. Or what's the point,
No, absolutely. But it's also the fact that, because, the biggest intimidation factor for many people and many brand ambassadors when they start working for a company is there's a big learning curve in the fact that you have creative ideas. Because you're in the industry, you see the things, you're in the street, you understand the language, you understand what bars need, but then being able, and obviously people who come from the commercial end of things see things more in like a 5-year plan. They look at things from the outside. So they do have a great perspective because they're able to see things long-term and build them out. But, being able to translate those creative ideas and what you're seeing in the industry, and then taking, as Teresa likes, the insights, and then being able to translate it into a program that's not just going to operate in one bar, it's going to operate in multiple bars across the across the country or even around the globe is another skill set. And I think, Miranda, you were saying, yes, because you did programming in your bars, you kind of understood how to do that on a little bit more of scale. And then Teresa, I know you have some insights on that and some perspective on that, I should say.
Yeah, I think especially as it pertains to my current role, the optics have become much more clear, especially now that everyone is shifting to more of like an omni-channel based programming. I know that in my early years, even as a salesperson, you just tried to get the cases in the door. And now when I was with Elyx, I was more of a story seller. I think that with the brand ambassador industry, we would be given, with Elyx, we were given autonomy to create programs all our own. We weren't told like, this is, the Grey Goose Boulangerie, or this is the Swedish something program. We were given a series of tools, like Miranda were saying, that were desirable from the bar. I mean, when you walked in and you saw copper, you knew Elyx had been there. We owned a color, like we owned an element. So for us, the program was, how do we help the bar enhance the overall experience for their consumers by giving them tools and the articulation to share a story? Because everybody just wants to feel a sense of camaraderie, or as in Pernod, we say conviviality, and I know I told you this ethos yesterday, but I truly believe it. And it's what dictates my love for the spirits industry. Is we used to, as human beings, congregate in churches and synagogues and temples, right? Now, where do we all come together? It's at bars and restaurants and hotels. These are not just hospitality establishments. These are hospitality temples. And we are here as purveyors of spirits to educate other spirits on how to bring those spirits to life. A bartender and a medicine man aren't so different. They both stand in front of on back of a wooden stick with glass bottles, herbs, spices, tinctures, some fermented, some not fermented. And you have the capacity to create something, an elixir, if you will, to give to somebody to shift their experience. So when it comes to programmability, you have to look at this from an entire experience. From the second they walk in the door, they see a familiar face, they go to that face, they ask that face for a drink of choice. And what do you have to do to get the bartender to say, I'm going to pull Elyx off the back bar, or I'm going to pull whatever brand off the back bar? And it's a sense memory thing. People don't remember what you say. They remember how you made them feel. So Absolutely. For me, my number one source of programming was my personality and my authenticity. I think we talked about this yesterday. I was the singing brand ambassador. I started every single one of my trainings with a song, and the song laced into the 5 ones that were the pillars that made Elyx so special.
Let's talk about this now, because I was going to say, we were just, one of the biggest parts of, being a brand ambassador is giving a brand education. And some people do it well and some people do not. And it can be very nerve wracking, and you do have to learn to cater it to the audience that's in front of you. And presenting vodka and making it interesting is not always easy. So Teresa, you had a very unique perspective, and it is my birthday, so I think some singing has to happen at some point. But and Miranda, I would love to hear you, because this is probably your first time, not your first time hearing Teresa sing, having a brand ambassador sing. At least for me it was. So
I do think so, on this is that you've got to have a very robust, correct information. You've got to be giving the correct information in a really professional way in order to be able to do the spinny stuff and make it fun and make it engaging. Unless the building blocks are there, it doesn't work. True. And I think that's what I've seen so much, is people trying to make it fun, and in fact they're taking any type of education out of it because it's just silly. And silly is also fun, but you've got to have the cornerstone there before you can do all the fun stuff. And that's why I think we were very lucky with Elyx, and why we could, be so playful in general, with every element of the brand, by the way, not just the ambassadorial program. We were very lucky to be given that freedom, shall we say. But the point is the liquid was just, incredible.
No, absolutely. And then you're right. I think you do need to have a solid understanding. You need to understand the category well. You need to understand the business well. And that gives you a great, just a great base to be able to build off of. And then you can do things that are silly, but still educational. And Teresa, as you said, there was the 5 elements of Elyx. So, and you would sing at all your brand ambassador training. So I think, an example needs to happen. I would love to hear your 5 ones.
I will give you my 5 ones, but just to echo, because as Miranda said this, the sentiment really resonated, because they didn't just take us to the distillery and put us in front of the master distiller to educate us, because I know ultimately this is about brand ambassadors and education. Is they put us through public speaking workshops. Like,
that's amazing.
In New Orleans, we had someone who is a specialist in public speaking come help us. And to a testament of the Miranda and team, they hired 3 people that also ended up having theater or arts degrees. Matthew Schaefer and Alex Goody both were trained performance individuals. So they had people that had the building blocks, like she was saying, the foundation to be able to do spinny things. So for me, my authentic state is living in a world of Rodgers and Hammerstein and a musical. I live my life with rose-colored glasses, and I'm usually singing to you. And if I'm not, I don't like you. So I would start every training with engaging with the staff in a way that they had to stop what they were doing and put their attention on me, because the most valuable thing you can give somebody is your time. Mm-hmm. So a rule of thumb is engage the audience. And if you can get them to participate, you're immediately going to hold their attention. So I would say, everybody put your hands up and give me a little spirit fingers. And then I need you all to just snap with me. So everyone just would snap this rhythm. And I'd get everybody in there snapping. Then I would go, 1 singular sensation, every little sip you take. 1 thrilling combination, every cocktail you make.
Love it.
1 sip and suddenly no other vodka will do. You know you'll never be thirsty with you. Know who? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to training on Absolut Elyx.
Love it.
And that was just, and I go, you're probably thinking, who is this crazy pixie? Why is she singing to me about vodka? There's a method to my madness. The song I sang you was the song 1 from the musical chorus line, and I'm going to give you 5 ones to walk away from, knowing why Absolut Elyx is so spectacular. So it all tied back in together, So I think that's about it, is how do you make yourself memorable in a way that no matter where I went from this place moving forward, I go into bars and people will not remember my name, but they'll remember, you're the Elyx singing girl. You're the Elyx singing girl. You give them an experience and they're going to remember the essence of what you're speaking about.
No, I think that's amazing. And because there is things, one of the key things I talk about when you're giving a presentation is, start them off with a grab and grabbing their attention. And it is hard when you do meet, bartenders. They are busy, even if you have, and, most of the time they'll only give you 5 minutes and you have a 15-minute presentation. So you have to narrow it down to the 5 minutes. And, I'll be honest with somebody, to start them off that way, it's going to be like, whoa, okay, this is definitely going to be something unique and different. And this is going to be fun. And I'm going to learn something. So I think that is an amazing, not everybody can sing that way. You have a beautiful voice, by the way. But, finding that grab. So, and the fact that you had the basis, and I love the fact, Miranda, that you guys put your team through speaking coach lessons, speech coach lessons, or public speaking courses. No, Diageo did that for me about 5 years into my career. And I was very grateful for them that I had this one-on-one coach to help me. And it is something I think is important for every brand ambassador to be able to put together. So I'm going to divert a little from this conversation just a bit, because I do want to talk about the fact that What do I want to talk about? Because we just we went off my question list. Okay, so you actually, Teresa, I'm going to go into this because you went from being a market manager and a state manager to being a brand ambassador. And we touched a little bit about this. So most people do it the opposite way. They go from, being a brand ambassador to maybe a market manager, maybe a state manager, the other way around. And you touched about the fact that this job really appealed to you. What appealed to you, and what about your previous role really helped you in your brand ambassador role?
Yeah, I want to talk about that, but I also think a really great and important topic is how to help people that are brand ambassadors step into more embedded positions within the supplier, right?
Absolutely.
So we talked about yesterday there being a ceiling with brand ambassadorship. You can only run around in the field and have those late nights for so long, and to where you want to take the information you learned as feet in the streets and make it applicable into programming that has an overarching effect to make an impact on the brand, right? Like, what can you take from being in the field and really helping it to move the needle as far as velocity and volume goes. So for me, coming from a traditional sales background, I had no optics into the operations of how bars worked. I had no idea. I was a hostess at a pancake house for like a week, and I was like, I can't wake up at 6 a.m. Forget about this. So for me, that was the only experience I had from an operations perspective, is being a hostess. So I went in and I was humble. I think that humility was the biggest thing that I took away from having a sales background. I could get cases in the door, no problem. But here I was talking to people that were, the best bartenders in the world. That's intimidating, right? Like, everyone from talking to Tyler Kitzman to John LeMayer to Bretta Michaels, all of these people that were in my local market that I had to appeal to. I just simply asked the questions of, what can I do to help your bar program?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of pushing an agenda from an Elyx perspective, I listened. So I think one thing that I took from being a salesperson was, instead of being the pusher, I became the recipient. And then it was up to me to figure out how to create a marriage between their desires and my KPIs, right?
Love it.
So from there, I think that's what I took. But one of the things we talked about a little bit yesterday was making sure that you are communicative with your managers of where you see yourself going. I always made it clear to Miranda and Stefan that I wanted more, and they were so very gracious in giving me the opportunity to manage some brand ambassadors once I moved into the national role, giving me more territory, giving me special projects. Stay hungry. Don't get complacent. And brand ambassadors is an easy position to get complacent in. It's comfy. And once you have your relationships, you can make a couple calls and sell in these programs that you're being handed from brand teams. Once you do that, it's a graveyard. You can't. You have to keep pushing yourself to reinvent yourself over and over again. I was with Elyx for 6.5 years, right? That's a really long time to be with one brand. And to be the face of the brand, you constantly had to continue to reinvent yourself, but also make sure that your brand image aligns with the image of the brand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think we just got an email about social media yesterday because somebody posted something they shouldn't have. But it's about making sure that when you're projecting your self-image, that it is not something that's going to conflict with the image that you're representing. Because when you put up 2 different Instagram profiles, you're not fooling anybody, right? Like, it's still the same person. It's just a different name on the Instagram. So I think the fluid.
No, I think that's a really, really good point. And I want you to continue, because it is something, and it's also about how you choose your job too. So don't go work for a brand that doesn't fit who you are as a person, because you need to live and breathe that brand. So if you prefer to be living in dive bars, then, there's a certain brand for that, right? If you prefer to living in, high-end hotels and beautiful restaurants and bars, because that's who you are and that's how you like to dress and who the people you like to be surrounded. Then a brand like Absolut, Elyx, you really do have to live and breathe your brand, so in your personal life and in your professional life.
Yeah, I think, that the word is, again, authenticity. It comes back to that. I think you made a really good point with making sure that the brand aligns with who you are. And people will also remember how you left a brand. That's a really big thing. People will remember you more of how you graciously exited rather than everything you did during your tenure. Because if you're you never know who's going to buy what brand. You never know. You never know what your next opportunity is going to be. Like I've been offered to work for a lot of different brands, and most of them I just couldn't align with. I wasn't drinking tequila up until about 6 months ago. And I mean, it made me a very angry person. It was a terrible idea, but I think I got over that now. But I had a great opportunity to move over to a tequila brand. I had to ask myself, can I do this? And the answer was no, because it wasn't authentic. And people can smell BS from a mile away, right? When someone is being truthful. So I think when you're presenting yourself on social media and you're talking about the brand, make it real. People want honesty. So if you're struggling or you're having a great day, make sure that the tonality is fluid, but also you're professional and you're representing a brand. So maybe filter a little bit when it comes to what you're choosing to put out there. Like, we don't need videos of you crying because you lost a placement,
I know there's a lot of things people should be filtering out there in the world that we just don't need to know. And that's a seminar for a whole nother day. It's conversation for a whole nother day. And if I start talking about it, you'll just see a very angry Elaine come out, and the happy little bubble will bow away very quickly. But I want to talk about, because I also will talk about the brand ambassadors and putting together people who fit the brand, because Miranda, you have I love your philosophy of what makes a great brand ambassador, and you put together a very unique team. So I would love to hear more about that, like how you chose people and why you put them together and what you were looking for.
Yeah, I mean, so as I said, is that we knew that we wanted some type of ambassadorial, some sort of program that was trade forward and how that would work. We called you brand agents, didn't we, to start off with? We deliberately went away from the word ambassador. That's right. Listen, when we arrived in the United States of America, it wasn't like everybody was jumping up and down going, please, can we have another super premium vodka? Please, I want it. It was a category which was not loved particularly by bartenders at all. Everybody was excited about tequila, mezcal, even I guess gin and a bit. I mean, now gin's gone a bit crazy again, but vodka was just so this was the task in hand. So I believed, having worked in vodka for many years, that we had this incredible quality liquid. I mean, and I think that was very interesting is that you can taste vodka neat, but the customer's never going to drink it neat at room temperature, let's be honest. So it was also about building a vehicle in which, we were very forthcoming with the martini, because I still believe today, I mean, it makes the best vodka martini. There's nothing that comes close really to it. So we pulled together, we talked about, how are we gonna reach people. And I knew and respected so many people in the bartending world who worked for accounts, who weren't ambassadors, so to speak. And, I just went to them, and they believed in the quality of the liquid as well. And again, it's about coming back to this whole thing. It's about building real connections and about being truly authentic. I mean, I'd like to think that people know me as the kind of person, again, who doesn't kind of pretend that, pretend I like something when I absolutely do not. And I would like to say, I surround myself with similar people who have very strong, passionate beliefs in things. So it was about building a team of people who shared a lot of the same values. And this sort of, I suppose, also as it kind of progressed to this family, this kind of Elyx family, I think it grew to be more than drinks and vodka. It was a whole kind of system of shared friendships and just ethics, the way that we believe things should be done, to be truthful and honest and straightforward and not hide behind things. And sure, I mean, Elyx and selling products, you tell stories, but it was about telling the truth, because we could tell the truth, and we were lucky to that end. So
well, you hired people like Teresa who did not come from the bar world, which was very interesting, because a lot of brands go directly to people. They find bartenders and they pull them out and they're like, oh my God, you're going to be amazing. You know how this industry works, but it's a huge transition. So you chose a different path. I mean, I think some of the people who work for you were bartenders, but yeah, you definitely put a very eclectic team together.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a combination of people who had worked in the trade for cities in which that was important. In New York City, it was important for us to have somebody who was from the trade to get into the type of accounts we had selected for New York City. That was important for us. Whereas when you talk about Miami, that's not what we need to do. We need to find someone who understands the culture of that city, because Elyx is a brand that we'd always felt should be part of popular culture versus being refined to this spirits world. It was much more to it than that. And there was such a great kind of back avenue with being from the house of Absolut that you could build. The DNA of the brand is, has so much strength and creativity within it. That there were so many other strands and stories to spin. So that's the reason why we created, an eclectic mix of people who came from different walks of life, relevant to that city. Because again, when you talk about Atlanta, you're not going to employ somebody of the same profile necessarily as you are from San Francisco, but people who all have the same belief system and the same vibe. I don't know how else to say it. I mean,
I get it. They need to click with your team.
Always like, yep, they're Elyx, yep. And there were a couple of people who weren't, who came and went. I mean, that's the reality of it. We did have, a couple of people on that, but it was so wonderful that we had this sort of, Elyx ambassador team, and then this second Elyx family type thing. In fact, look what I just saw, that we made everybody into little dolls.
That's right. I don't know if I can hold on. I was gonna say, I think I could make. Can I make you bigger? Oh shit! I just added her. I just removed her. I can't make you bigger.
But anyway, I mean, that's like I have weird voodoo dolls of everyone. I do not. But when we all didn't go, there we go. When we all couldn't go to Tails, we made everybody the little.
Oh, that's so cute. Creepy, but cute.
We could all be together as little felt dolls.
But I was gonna say, is that also you're talking about? Because you also put together, a team of bartenders that worked for you. So they weren't brand ambassadors, but they were kind of brand ambassadors, right? And they were some of the best bartenders in the world, which was amazing. And it's such a great strategy for brands to do. It's like to build the community by bringing them into the fold. So, talk a little bit about that, because I think it's one of the most a strategic thing for any brand to do is to not just go into somebody's bar, get to know them that way, but actually hire them and hire them for events, hire them for the brand. So they really have a love for the brand. You can't buy that. Well, you can, but
I think it started with us hanging out at the Artesian a lot, and it just being so crazy fun in there, and just talking to Alex and Simone, and we were like, okay, let's just do something completely crazy. And so we gave them the vehicle for creativity to do something completely crazy at Tails, like wear gorilla suits. And I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff happened. And that's how I suppose this thing started, in terms of working with people in the trade, but giving them the support to fulfill their wildest dreams, if you like. So when we sat down and talked about, Tails, it would be like, I would say I have a vision it's going to be about this. What do you think about this vision? And then they would say, well, we think you want to layer this on this and this on this. And I would say, what about a train? And they'd be like, yeah, let's have it. So it was a very collaborative piece that I think, and speaking to all the people involved, they've always said this to me, is that they loved it because it was not like working with another brand, because there wasn't another remit there. It was just like, let's do fun stuff together and everyone's going to come along and have a good time. I mean, that's what it was about, because the liquid was good enough to be able to do that. That's the point. The quality of the product wasn't even questioned. It was using it as a vehicle for, creating this other world.
No, which is amazing. I mean, you had as somebody who had the pleasure of going to the Elyx houses and the garden in Tales, it will be something that will definitely be missed as Tales comes back again. And I can't believe this, but we actually did cover in a very convoluted way all the questions that I put out there in the world. But I do want to expand, actually. And as Teresa, you started talking about this, but I don't think we actually finished the conversation, which is about, and Miranda, I'd love your thoughts on this as well. We started getting there, but it's more about, okay, so you have brand ambassadors, and you said there's a ceiling, right? For a lot of brand ambassadors, you can only stay in that role for so long. But Teresa, you were saying the people supported you. You asked for what you wanted. So, did you ask for trainings? Like, expand on that a little bit more. And Miranda, what's your philosophy of how people can help their brand ambassadors kind of move up within the company?
Yeah, I think a day in the lives, right? How to better understand. I remember asking Stefan all the time, what do you do all day? Not because I didn't think he was doing anything, but like, what do you do all day? What is a day in the life of your aspirational role? And have that person either let you shadow them and walk alongside them and understand where you have gaps and how you need to further educate yourself. For me, it was about better understanding the inner workings of a large company. So when I was brought onto the brand team as an activation manager, it was the first time I actually got a glimpse behind the velvet curtain of how the way of working happens from a corporate perspective. So that was super eye-opening for me. And then when I was in that position, I felt complacent almost immediately. I understood how to do this job, and I said, okay, what's next? So I would just ask, is there a task force that I can be a part of? Or I would go to other brand teams and say, what are you guys doing for these next programs? Can I listen in? Just sitting on phone calls that maybe don't pertain to you, but so that you can get immersed in the vernacular of vocabulary. Because trust me, that's one of the biggest adjustments from moving. And I went to school. I have a double major in jazz and public relations, but none of that was business oriented. And you realize very quickly is there's an entire other language that's used. God, the acronyms, the cheat sheet of acronyms that I have is probably like, I think the last time, because there was a new hire that I became friends with, I sent over to let me backtrack. There was a girl named Elyx Mateus who is just a little genius, and she had a list going because she had been working with Pernod for a minute, and I added mine to her list, and it was something like 270 something acronyms that if you walked into this industry, you'd have no idea what it meant. Like POC, I have no idea what POC is. Point of contact. Mm-hmm. People would have the word wow in there all the time. I'm like, who's so amazing? I'm like, it's way of working, little things like that, where it's a little robotic for my taste, but it's the world we live in. So you have to learn to be adaptable and a chameleon and adjust to the corporation if that's the direction you want to go. And I love where I am right now. My new job is a channel shopper manager for all the prestige brands in the Pernod portfolio. So I'm in a way an insights and ideas factory. I got to take everything that I learned from being in the field, my sales background, and now I'm pairing that with insights and data, and it allows me to create these programs that are truly impactful. Also listen to your gut. and look to the universe. It will always christen the path that you're on. If you're in flow, and if you're in what you're doing, little synchronicities will occur that will christen your path. And when you see those, go towards it. Ask questions about that, because that is how I've always lived my life. And I'm genuinely can say that I'm happy 90% of the time because of the perspective that I give myself. So that's my soapbox. I'm stepping down.
I love it. And before we're ending, I think the other thing, just to add to what you said, because those are all amazing points, is also knowing what you don't want, like learning what you don't want to do. And you sometimes only learn that because you step into a role and you realize it, and then you're like, nope. Like you said, you got into one position, you're like, nah, I'm good. I outgrew this already. I know that, oh God, putting together, I work for Anheuser-Busch, and I had to write 3 decks a day. And I never want to do that again. I never want my day just to be spent like just sitting in front of my computer writing a PowerPoint deck 100 times a day. Now, you have to always do decks wherever corporate position you're in, but to a level where I couldn't do anything creative anymore because all my creative energy was exhausted trying to put together a stupid PowerPoint deck. And I realize now, no matter what I do, I don't ever want to do that again. Like I know I want to do more creative roles, and I love education, and the Brand Ambassador Academy is a result of that. Like I created this Brand Ambassador Academy because I really wanted to work for myself and I wanted to help other people. But knowing what you don't want to do sometimes is also as important as figuring out what you do want to do. Miranda, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what can people do to help their brand ambassadors?
I think one thing that's interesting from what T said is that, she came from a non-traditional brand ambassador background, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're talking about like the rites of passage from bartender, brand ambassador, and what do you do next? I think that it's a slightly different path, because the profile of somebody who is, used to jump from the bar to brand ambassador was kind of the best bartender, right? So the guy who made the best drinks became the brand ambassador in this kind of old axis, okay? And sometimes that person may be able to make exquisite, amazing drinks. Yeah, 100%. Could they talk about them in a engaging way to the room? Not always, and also I think that if you think of some of the baggage that a brand ambassador needs to kind of let go of in that situation, I would say a lot of it is, sometimes there's a preciousness that doesn't enable them to really start thinking bigger picture and thinking big. And I think, I was lucky because I came from, self-taught bartender to looking after multiple outlets in the UK. So I understood this idea of scale, and this was real scale, because it's about like taking a really high-end cocktail and how do you make that adapted for a much bigger pool. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I think in one of the things that the brand ambassador needs to do if they want to progress within the marketing team or the sales team, whatever, is maybe a bit less precious and think a bit bigger, because these attention to details you can't always bring through in a bigger picture. And at the end of the day, when you start working for a brand, these, as we talked about earlier in the chat, is that the bars that we may go to every day, it's teeny little amount of bars, and not all bars are ever going to be able to be those bars. So it's about kind of thinking bigger and not being afraid to think bigger either. I do think, though, I mean, exactly as Teresa said, if you don't believe in it, and this is what we're all saying, and I think this is very human to people in the drinks business. And one of the reasons why I like the drinks business is because people are genuinely human and passionate. The people that make our spirits are very passionate about the ingredients that go into them. It's a fine art to them. And as a result, many people are driven by this very passionate vision. Although I think in recent years, it's started to become, as Teresa said, this introduction of marketing jargon. I think that that's not come out of the drinks business. That's come from other people coming into the drinks business from big FMCG companies.
Absolutely. That's people coming from Campbell's Soup that just got out of their master's program who now work in the drinks business, and they're bringing their their vernacular with them, and it's something that is, it's just not normal. I think one of the biggest downloads for my program is the acronym sheets that I put together for people, and in every corporation are also different, so some words don't always translate. Actually, there's one thing, and I know we're kind of a little bit over time, but I didn't have a chance to talk to you about this, Miranda. And I thought it was something that you did so well. You talked about the fact that, you took a luxury vodka in a crowded market, but, there's a lot of people coming out there right now. And this is the last question before we get to the advice that we're going to tell everybody, one word of advice from all of you to people getting into this position, is there are a lot of the luxury market is expanding, especially now with new tequila brands and mezcal brands, and everybody's trying to find their little niche. And you did something quite incredible, taking a brand like Elyx that was in a very crowded marketplace, and you created a strategy to really position that brand to be. And as Teresa said, you walked in, you would know Elyx was at a location. So, what was your strategy like for yourself? Like, I know you mentioned yesterday something about you only went to specific cities. It wasn't even the state; it was like a very specific city. There were only specific bars. Can you expand upon that? Like, what was your strategy for the brand and why?
I took certainly with the trade outreach, which later, rolled into the brand in general. So much influence from Absolut itself as this real trailblazing, differentiated brand. When it was launched in the 80s, Absolut was something completely different. So we tried with Elyx to do the same thing for this era, if you like, and everything that we did was so look different, do everything differently. Again, the POS with Absolut had been such a massive part of the brand. So to create desirable POS, again, it's not rocket science. It was about creating desirable POS. And funnily enough, when I first started working on Elyx, I said, come on, let's do copper. And I was told by the creative director of Absolut at the time, absolutely not. You must not make anything out of copper ever. You must never make POS out of copper. So
why?
I don't know. Absolutely no idea. It was just their vision. It was a very serious creative department. It was their vision. And in fact, at one stage, I was asked to make an ice bucket out of stone. So as soon as the door of copper was opened and I was allowed to all of a sudden use the copper. In fact, you know what? I don't think I even asked. I think I probably just made it. And everyone was like, yeah, that's amazing. I think it probably started with bar tools. And then it was about creating, moving Elyx into a lifestyle space away from vodka. And it was trying to play a totally different game. So for me, it was like not looking like vodka, not behaving like vodka. Sure, behaving like a super premium spirit, but behaving like luxury. And what was fun luxury, and what did fun luxury look like? Because at the end of the day, we're a product that's, lubricating social environments that are supposed to be fun. And it's not about, cold, frosty bottles, which the rest of the super premium vodka category were doing. It's about warmth, fun, connections, emotions, and exactly as T said earlier on. That was something that always influenced me. It was not what you say; it's the way you make people feel. Mm-hmm. And with Elyx, we always wanted people to, give people this kind of elevated hospitality that was slightly escapist, quite, slightly fantastical. And we wanted that to be embodied through our ambassador program, in every cup we created, from the crazy pineapples to the tortoises and the little birds, etc., etc. So it was about creating something on that very, top end luxury, but also, making it fun. Mm-hmm. And that was, I think, completely different to what our competitors were doing.
Absolutely. I never saw any brand do it. And to your point, there was always an element of fun. And to T's point, there was always, you walked into a bar or a restaurant, you would know, like, this is an Elyx house. It was like you brought your Elyx house to multiple spaces all around the country. You would know when a place was an Elyx house. You got the backdrop. Oh no, I have a pineapple in my room. In my living room, it sits on top. It was from the Artesian, actually. The Elyx gave me one. I gave it to my daughter, actually, which probably not politically correct or appropriate, but it's still a pineapple. It's just a vessel. She puts juice in it, everyone. Don't worry. Mo, but thanks for that. But yeah, I thought that was really incredible what you did there, and you definitely made the brand stand out. All right, so a question I love to ask, that I love to end my show with, which is a little bit about advice. So if you could give a piece of advice to anybody who's looking to become a brand ambassador or is an actual brand ambassador, and how they can be successful, besides loving the brand that you work for, what would it be?
I think that I would start with saying that everything in life is about perspective. You kept saying just previously that, Elyx brought fun, and it made me think of Mary Poppins, and every job there must be done, there's an element of fun. You find the fun and poof, the job's a game. And I think that being playful and the gamification of life is truly the best way to live this existence. You can change your mind, you can change your life. And I think taking care of your mental well-being and putting yourself first and foremost in a place in which you can be a beacon of light, no matter what you do, brand ambassador, teacher, lawyer, cop, doesn't matter. I think the most important thing to do is to be right within yourself before you can step out into the world. And I think, having been a person that has dealt with mental health issues their whole life, the one thing that makes me really good at what I do is ritualistically having a routine in the morning to get my mind, body, and spirit in a good place. And that way I can go out into the world and carry whatever message I choose to carry. And I just got really lucky to be able to carry the message of, like Miranda said, in a world of tall, frosty blue bottles, we were energetically and aesthetically different. And I got to be truthful and authentic in everything I did, and love the people you work for. Get to know them, find out real things about them. I'm so lucky to say that my Elyx team was all at my wedding, they're my family, chosen family. So get to know the people you work with. They're humans too. And be aligned with yourself before you align with anything or anybody else.
Great advice. Miranda?
I mean, I agree with so much of what Teresa says, unsurprisingly. I think also do things that bring you joy. I mean, I think that, since this crazy pandemic, I think everybody, whether they're brand ambassadors or not, I think everybody's at an evaluation process with themselves, their lives. They've had a lot of time to think about things that perhaps they didn't have time to think about before. And I think certainly for me, I think enjoy your time and enjoy those moments. But also remember, especially in an ambassador role, when maybe you're traveling a lot, put it into perspective. This is like, we're selling vodka. We're not, conducting brain surgery. And maybe people in our drinks industry in general sometimes need to remember this, that, we are slinging booze, guys. We're selling cases of vodka or whatever we're doing. It's fun. It should be fun. It should bring us joy. But I think, as I say, I think that goes for everything in every pursuit that you have. Pursue happiness, and do things that, exactly. I want to be able to sleep at night.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think pursuing happiness, being able to sleep at night because you did the right thing, and being just a good person is an incredible thing. And balance, having a routine in the morning. Teresa, you just reminded me, because I've lost mine the last couple of weeks because I've been so busy, and I feel it. Like my husband just said to me, Elaine, I think you need to meditate again. I can see the stress. Like today's my birthday and I'm stressed out, and I shouldn't be. I should be enjoying. So on that words of advice, I'm going to go enjoy my birthday and go have a martini and pursue happiness in my day and life. And ladies, this was such a joy to get to know the two of you a bit better. I look forward to doing it longer, maybe in person one of these days. I would really enjoy that. And you both are going to be successful in everything that you do in your life. So I can already tell, just because you're amazing women, and I'm honored to know you. So thank you so much for joining me here, and for all of you that tuned in. So go have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.